Mike Schmidt, you can take your apology and shove it up your ass.
First of all, it's a language barrier. And, because of that, I think he can't be a guy.
When you think of Mike Schmidt, you probably think of one of baseball's all-time greats, a Hall of Fame third baseman who dominated the game with power and precision. But what you might not know is that after hanging up his cleats, Schmidt became one of the most controversial voices in baseball. And the players he seemed to hate? Well, that story is more complicated than you think. Mike Schmidt is universally recognized as the greatest player in Philadelphia Phillies history. With 548 home runs and countless defensive accolades, he cemented his legacy as arguably the best third baseman ever to play the game. But his post-playing career told a different story. As a broadcaster and columnist, Schmidt found himself at the center of multiple controversies that had fans questioning whether the legend they loved on the field was someone entirely different off it. The truth is, Schmidt's conflicts with other players weren't really about personal hatred at all. They were about something deeper, something that reveals the generational clash between old-school baseball and the modern game. The first major controversy erupted in June 2017 when Schmidt was working as a Phillies broadcaster. During a radio interview, he was asked a simple question about whether the team could build around their talented young center fielder, Odubel Herrera. Schmidt's answer was blunt and immediate. No, he said, and the reason shocked everyone listening. Schmidt claimed there was a language barrier that would prevent Herrera from being a true team leader. But he didn't stop there. Schmidt went into specific detail about what he meant. He said that because Herrera was Venezuelan and didn't speak perfect English, he couldn't sit in a circle with 4 or 5 American players and talk about the game. He couldn't discuss the inner workings of baseball strategy. He couldn't even deliver basic criticism to a teammate, like telling someone they needed to run harder to first base. The backlash was immediate and intense. Here's the thing that made Schmidt's comments so problematic. Herrera could communicate just fine with his coaches and teammates. He occasionally gave interviews in English. Like many Latin players, he used the team's interpreter to ensure precision and clarity, especially on complex topics. Other Venezuelan players like Freddie Galvis were considered clubhouse leaders despite not being native English speakers. The beloved Carlos Ruiz had used interpreters early in his career and became one of the most respected leaders in Phillies history. What Schmidt was really saying went beyond simple communication. He was establishing a precondition for leadership that required complete cultural and linguistic assimilation into an English-speaking norm. True leadership, in his traditional view, meant being able to strategize verbally with American players in their language. This created an unfair barrier for Latin players. Schmidt released a formal apology later that same day through the Phillies organization. He said his answer was disrespectful to Herrera and Latin players in general, calling it a misrepresentation of his true intentions. Phillies manager Pete Mackanin also addressed the incident, describing the comment as ill-advised but defending Schmidt's character by insisting he was by no means a racist. The organizational response focused on rapid damage control and protecting the reputation of their most revered Hall of Famer. But the most powerful response came from Herrera himself. Speaking through the team's interpreter, Herrera accepted the apology, but offered an important counterpoint. He said he didn't agree with Schmidt's comments, but respected him as a player. Then Herrera laid out his own philosophy of leadership. He acknowledged that speaking English would help him in America, but he explained that leadership comes in different forms. You can lead by example. You can lead by bringing energy to the team that others feed off. That was the kind of leader he was at that moment. If you're still watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Do you think Schmidt was out of line with his comments about Herrera? Or was he just being honest about what leadership requires? Let me know your thoughts. This clash revealed something fundamental about Schmidt's worldview. He came from an era of command and control leadership, the highly confrontational style he experienced under manager Dallas Green. Schmidt favored the traditional, verbal, English-centric model of authority. Herrera represented the modern, performance-based approach, where authority is earned through energy and action rather than linguistic fluency. What made this controversy even more significant was the context of Schmidt's post-playing career. After retirement, Schmidt had expressed interest in becoming the Phillies manager or general manager, but the front office ultimately determined that Schmidt would not be a good hire in any capacity for a leadership role. This institutional rejection was crucial. Denied the opportunity to enforce his traditional standards directly within the organization, Schmidt channeled his frustration into his roles as broadcaster and columnist. Unable to exercise formal authority, he used his media platform to voice critical, traditionalist standards. The pattern became clear over time, but the Herrera controversy wasn't Schmidt's only battle. Perhaps his most consistent crusade has been his unwavering advocacy for his former teammate Pete Rose. Schmidt and Rose won the 1980 World Series together, and that shared history created a bond that Schmidt has refused to break, even in the face of baseball's most sacred rule. Rose was permanently banned from baseball for betting on games while he was a player and manager. Schmidt has spent years arguing that Rose has been punished too harshly. His argument centers on time served and age. Writing years after the banishment, Schmidt stressed that Rose, who was 73 at the time, had served a sufficient efficient penalty of 25 years and was running out of time to benefit from any forgiveness. Schmidt consistently emphasizes one critical detail. Rose never bet against his own team. He only bet for the Reds to win. Schmidt uses this fact to argue that Rose didn't intentionally alter game outcomes through managerial decisions, which makes the offense less severe. In Schmidt's view, Rose is guilty of a crime against baseball, but the punishment has become disproportionate to the offense. What makes Schmidt's defense of Rose even more pointed is his comparison to modern scandals. Schmidt argues directly that Rose's gambling indiscretion is no worse than players being caught using performance-enhancing drugs. Schmidt highlights what he sees as MLB's hypocritical ethical hierarchy. While Rose is reduced to selling autographs to pay his bills, players like Manny Ramirez and his cronies apologized, were forgiven, and received $20 million a year, giggling all the way to the bank. By equating gambling with steroid use, Schmidt challenges the integrity of baseball's establishment. If players who cheated competitive fairness and endangered their health can return and profit, then permanently banishing a manager who only bet on his team to win is fundamentally hypocritical. Schmidt also understood the political reality of the situation. He recounted that after Rose's confession, then-Commissioner Bud Selig initially seemed cooperative and forgiving, even helping map out a possible path to reinstatement. But Rose's recurring bad decisions destroyed that goodwill. Rose's premature book release about his confession coincided disastrously with the 2004 Hall of Fame induction ceremony, effectively stealing the spotlight. Selig viewed this as an act of sleaze, and his attitude hardened permanently. Schmidt saw the retirement of Selig and the arrival of Rob Manfred as a crucial opportunity. He openly urged Manfred to reconsider Rose's penalty and cut ties with the previous administration's hardline approach. The third-player relationship that defined Schmidt's post-career controversies might surprise you. George Brett, the Hall of Fame third baseman for the Kansas City Royals, was Schmidt's greatest rival during the 1980s. The two were constantly compared as the best at their position, and their rivalry peaked when their teams faced off in the 1980 World Series. The competitive intensity was immense, but the evidence suggests their relationship was rooted in mutual professional respect, not hatred. What's fascinating is how Schmidt used Brett to validate his own worldview. Schmidt shared a powerful story about Brett's post-retirement struggle as the Royals' hitting coach. Brett, regarded as one of the greatest hitters in baseball history, experienced immense frustration because young Royals hitters routinely sought advice from the assistant coach, who told them what they wanted to hear, rather than seeking Brett's hard-won expertise. Brett eventually quit, feeling he was wasting everyone's time. Schmidt's decision to relate this story transformed his historical rival into a contemporary ally. He used Brett's frustration as evidence for his own views on the decline of player accountability in the modern era. Schmidt's critiques extended beyond individual players to the game itself. He publicly criticized MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred's crackdown on pitchers using foreign substances, the so-called sticky stuff protocol. Schmidt argued that pitchers using every possible method to get a better grip has been in baseball forever. He viewed the enforcement as institutional overreach and disingenuous moralizing about a practice embedded in the sport's history. Schmidt argued the real problem wasn't pitchers maximizing their effectiveness, but hitters failing to adapt. His most direct attack on modern baseball came when he stated that the decline of hitting today lies directly in the hitter's inability to hit the high fastball and the lack of accountability for striking out. This was an implicit rejection of modern analytics that prioritize launch angle and home runs over contact skills. Schmidt's communication struggles went beyond ideological debates. During one broadcast, he made an inappropriate joke about his wife being his dishwasher at home, then awkwardly referenced the Me Too movement. The comment drew immediate criticism on social media, with many demanding his removal from the broadcast booth. This pattern of controversial comments revealed that Schmidt genuinely struggles to understand the importance of cultural and social sensitivity in the contemporary public sphere. So what's the final verdict on Mike Schmidt and the players he supposedly hated? The truth is more nuanced than simple hatred. Schmidt's conflicts arose from irreconcilable generational, cultural, and ideological clashes. Odubel Herrera represented the modern, diverse player whose leadership challenged Schmidt's rigid expectations about linguistic fluency. Pete Rose represented a failure of professional ethics that Schmidt felt compelled to defend within a framework of loyalty and perceived institutional hypocrisy. George Brett transitioned from fierce competitor to intellectual ally, validating Schmidt's critique of declining accountability. These weren't personal feuds. They were battles over the soul of baseball itself, fought by a Hall of Fame legend who couldn't accept that the game had moved on without him. Mike Schmidt remains one of baseball's greatest players, and his statistical dominance is beyond question. But his post-playing legacy is defined by his struggle to bridge the gap between the demanding world of the traditionalist icon and the ethical standards of the contemporary era. While his commentary is often delivered insensitively, it consistently forces reflection on core values of professionalism and accountability in baseball. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of baseball's most complex figures, smash that like button and subscribe for more content. And drop a comment telling me what you think about Schmidt's legacy. Was he trying to preserve baseball's soul or just an old school player who couldn't adapt to a changing world? I want to hear your take.